Hey there, folks. With April 2025 just around the corner, it's time to talk about a development that's on nearly every American consumer's mind: the cost of groceries, specifically which items are about to cost you a lot more at checkout. Prices go up, prices go down, but sometimes there are very specific reasons that a handful of staples suddenly shoot right through the roof. Today, I want to share what I've learned from industry experts, big-name grocery store managers, and even some of my friends and neighbors who've been closely tracking food costs. It's a pretty big deal considering that many of these foods are things you and I likely buy every single week. Before I dive into the details, let me just say that I'm right there with you. Nobody likes shelling out more money for the exact same groceries we bought for less only a few months ago. But by staying informed, you can make some smart decisions about where and how you shop, which might help you save a little money in the midst of these price hikes. More importantly, it also helps you appreciate how interconnected the food system is. Everything from weather patterns in South America to freight costs in California to labor shortages in the Midwest can factor into why your grocery bill ends up being higher by a few dollars, or sometimes more, than you expected. So let's get started, shall we? First up on our list of foods whose prices are about to spike is everyone's favorite breakfast companion: eggs. You might recall how egg prices had been climbing and then receding over the past couple of years, with factors such as avian influenza and feed costs driving prices upward. In 2025, we're looking at a renewed increase in feed costs. According to a prominent agriculture economist at Purdue University, feed prices for laying hens have gone up nearly 15% over the last 6 months due to a combination of droughts in grain-producing regions and increased overseas demand for American grain. That translates directly into more expensive eggs for you and me. It's not just feed prices either. Several large-scale egg producers have reported lingering after effects from earlier avian flu outbreaks, meaning their flocks haven't fully rebounded. Nancy Wilcox, who manages a regional grocery store chain in the Midwest, told me last week that she's bracing for supply to run tight in the weeks ahead. She said, "We're planning to boost our egg orders from multiple suppliers to ensure our shelves stay stocked, but those suppliers are already increasing their prices due to ongoing feed and transport costs. Unfortunately, we'll have to pass some of that along to our customers." Don't shoot the messenger here, folks. Just be prepared for a jump when you're restocking your fridge with a fresh dozen. Number 2. Beef. Whether you're grilling up juicy burgers or cooking a comforting pot roast, you've probably noticed that beef prices don't always stay steady for long. This coming month, we're expecting a significant rise in the cost of ground beef, steaks, and other cuts. Industry analysts point to the lasting impact of cattle herd reductions that occurred back in 2023. Severe drought in key cattle-producing states like Texas and Oklahoma forced ranchers to thin their herds. That downsizing is still echoing through the market today. Ranchers might be in the process of rebuilding, but cattle take time to raise, so supply is nowhere near where it was before the droughts. On top of that, many ranchers are contending with higher costs for energy, water, and labor. Carmen Sosa, a cattle rancher in the Texas Panhandle, explained that even though conditions have improved with a bit more rain last year, the overall herd size remains below pre-drought levels. She said, "We'd like to get back to full capacity, but the cost of feed is just too high, and the calves we're raising now won't be ready for market until later in the year." At the grocery level, managers say their wholesale beef costs are ticking upward each week. One local grocery manager in Phoenix mentioned that his store has no choice but to revise price tags on steaks and ground beef in early April. So if you've got a family barbecue in mind for the spring, be sure to check your local sales and see if you can snag a deal before it all goes sky high. Now, let's talk about a morning essential that many of us rely on to start our day with a bit of pep in our step. Number 3. Coffee. Yes, that magical brew that helps us navigate early mornings and power through our to-do lists. Experts in the coffee trade are pointing to a tricky global supply environment. A substantial portion of our coffee beans, especially the beloved Arabica varieties, come from Brazil and Colombia, where unpredictable weather has caused crop yields to drop. Over the past few months, Brazil experienced heavier than usual rainfall in some regions and short spells of frost in others. A bizarre climate pattern that's thrown farmers off and decreased the yield. Meanwhile, labor costs throughout the supply chain have climbed considerably. When we hear about the price of coffee futures on the commodity market, it might sound like complicated Wall Street jargon, but the result is pretty straightforward for your local cafe or supermarket shelf. Higher wholesale costs that eventually filter down to us as consumers. My friend Joshua, who prides himself on being a self-proclaimed coffee connoisseur, told me that he's already noticed that some of his preferred specialty roasters have bumped up bag prices by a couple of dollars. He said, "If you multiply that by the number of bags I go through each month, it's no joke." And industry insiders predict more price hikes right around the bend in April 2025, so brace yourselves. Another popular grocery staple that's going to see a notable price spike is chicken. Chicken has long been touted as an affordable, versatile protein, but costs are steadily marching upward for some of the same reasons that eggs are getting expensive. It all ties back to feed costs, labor shortages, and the cyclical nature of supply. One of my neighbors who works at a major poultry processing plant in Arkansas told me that labor remains their biggest issue. We're struggling to keep enough staff on hand, and when we do manage to recruit new workers, we have to pay them more to stay. That means production costs are rising, she explained. On top of that, feed costs are again a critical factor. Much of the grain used in chicken feed has spiked in price, fueling higher costs across the board. Some grocery stores in the Southeast are already signaling that chicken prices could jump by as much as 10% in April. While that might not sound like an astronomical jump at first, it certainly adds up over multiple shopping trips, especially for families that rely on chicken as a go-to dinner choice. Number 5. Cooking oil. Specifically, olive oil is going to see a sharp increase in price. While the U.S. does produce some olive oil, the majority of what we consume still comes from the Mediterranean region, particularly Spain and Italy. A series of intense heat waves across Spain during the 2024 harvest severely curtailed olive production. Simultaneously, water shortages made it tough for farmers to keep groves healthy, so the harvest was smaller. Less supply equals higher prices, plain and simple. Additionally, shipping costs for imports remain higher than they were a few years back due to fuel and labor expenses, and those costs also get passed on to consumers. According to data from the U.S. International Trade Commission, imports of olive oil are anticipated to be down, while domestic demand is still going strong. That imbalance, as explained by a culinary industry expert named Chef Miranda Patel, is creating a perfect storm for price hikes in April. She joked that maybe now's the time to practice cooking with other types of oil like canola or vegetable oil, which haven't been as dramatically affected yet. But if you insist on your extra virgin olive oil, you'll be looking at a heftier bill in a few weeks. If there's one bright, fresh staple that always finds its way onto American plates, it's tomatoes. Whether they're topping your burger, starring in a salad, or simmering in your favorite pasta sauce, tomatoes are in high demand. However, the cost of greenhouse-grown tomatoes in particular is projected to rise in April. The reason? Energy prices. Greenhouse operations use large amounts of electricity or natural gas to maintain optimal growing conditions, and higher energy costs push up production expenses. Then there are the lingering supply chain hiccups that have been plaguing the produce industry. A produce buyer for a chain in the Northeast, who asked to remain anonymous, mentioned that transportation costs have risen again. Diesel fuel might not be at its all-time high, but it's nowhere near as cheap as it was, so moving tomatoes from greenhouses to distribution centers is getting pricier by the week. And that's just the greenhouse angle. Certain tomato varieties grown in open fields in Florida and California also face higher fertilizer and irrigation costs. By the time those plump red beauties arrive at your grocery store, you're looking at a noticeable price bump. If you want to grow your own tomatoes, now might be a good time to buy some seeds. Just be prepared to keep them safe from any unexpected cold snaps that might still linger. Next up, we can't forget a major American favorite, cheese. Whether you're a cheddar devotee, a mozzarella aficionado, or into the snazzier, more artisanal varieties, cheese is practically a mainstay in American fridges. But as with eggs and chicken, the cost of dairy feed is significant, so everything from fluid milk to cheese ends up more expensive when feed grains become scarce or pricier. According to a dairy market report from the USDA, national milk production is somewhat lower this year than expected, and cheesemakers are feeling the squeeze on multiple fronts: feed for the cows, energy to power their production facilities, and labor costs. A grocery store manager in Milwaukee, a city that prides itself on its cheese, told me he's seen wholesale cheese prices tick up bit by bit over the past couple of months. He speculates that retail prices could jump around 8% to 12% in April, depending on the cheese variety. While a seasoned shopper in the store said she'll keep on clipping coupons and waiting for sales to get her cheddar fix, it's worth noting that coupon clipping only goes so far when the baseline price for cheese as a category is climbing. If you're a cheese lover, you might need to get creative in the coming months and keep your eyes open for special promotions if you want to avoid paying top dollar for your favorite block or bag. From the dairy case, let's pivot to something sweet, or at least the ingredient that helps bring sweetness to so many products: sugar. Sugar isn't just for baking cookies or sweetening your morning coffee. It's an ingredient in countless items, from cereals to salad dressings. So when sugar prices rise, it has a ripple effect throughout the grocery store. Right now, global sugar stocks are at a somewhat precarious level. India, one of the world's largest sugar producers, cut back on exports earlier this year due to unfavorable weather patterns affecting sugarcane yield. Brazil likewise had a rough patch of climate swings that impacted its sugarcane harvest. Combine that with shipping and logistic disruptions, and you've got a recipe for a constrained supply. According to an international food commodities analyst I spoke with via email, sugar demand in the U.S. remains stable, but with fewer exports on the global market, we're seeing a classic supply-demand mismatch that typically means higher prices. By April, you'll likely notice that a 4-pound bag of sugar runs a bit more than you remembered. It might not be earth-shattering in isolation, but consider how sugar is used in everything from store-bought baked goods to ketchup and peanut butter. Costs for many sugar-dependent products can nudge upward as well. If you have a sweet tooth, maybe now's the time to cut back for health reasons, and you'll save a little cash along the way. We can't talk about price spikes without mentioning wheat. Wheat influences so many items in the grocery store: bread, pasta, crackers, pastries, cereals, you name it. And for April 2025, wheat-derived products are on track to cost more than they have in a while. The Midwest has experienced unseasonably dry conditions in some areas, while other parts have dealt with flooding during critical planting and growing periods. According to agronomists tracking these issues, the unpredictable weather cycles have slowed crop progress. When you factor in the ongoing challenges with trucking and rail systems, these forms of transport keep flour mills supplied and keep flour moving to bakeries and food manufacturers. It translates to higher flour prices across the board. One bakery owner in Chicago told me that she's paying almost 20% more for flour this spring compared to last fall. She's had to adjust menu prices, and though she tries to keep it modest, there's only so much you can absorb before you start losing money. If you're someone who loves bagels, loaves of bread, or even that slice of pizza on Friday night, don't be surprised if you see those prices creeping up as well. Regular shoppers I've talked to are already noticing that the cheapest store-brand loaves of bread are not quite as cheap as they were a few months ago, and certain premium artisan brands are creeping further out of reach. That's just the reality of the wheat market's volatility. Finally, let's discuss a wholesome nut that's become a go-to snack and a favorite in plant-based milk alternatives: almonds. California's Central Valley is the heart of American almond production, and in recent years, farmers there have struggled with the swings between drought and heavy rain. Extreme weather conditions can hamper the pollination process, which depends on bees being able to do their job in calm, stable weather. When storms and cold snaps occur during the almond bloom, yields can suffer. Combined with the ongoing cost of fertilizer, water, and labor in California, almonds are simply more expensive to produce now. My friend, who runs a small health food store, told me that she's already received a memo from her supplier indicating that almond prices will jump by close to 15% next month. It's not just the raw almonds either. Almond milk, almond butter, and all those specialty snack bars that feature almonds as their primary ingredient could go up in price as well. Grocery store managers say they anticipate that some customers will shift to other nuts like peanuts or cashews if almond prices continue their upward trend, but of course, all nut prices tend to be somewhat interconnected. For now, almonds remain at the top of the list of nuts that will likely set you back a few extra bucks when you're tossing them into your cart. So there you have it. Eggs, beef, coffee, chicken, olive oil, tomatoes, cheese, sugar, wheat products, and almonds are all on track to cost significantly more in April 2025. It's a tough break for our wallets, especially after the roller coaster of grocery prices we've seen in recent years. Some folks I chatted with at my local farmers market said they're planning to cut back on certain splurges and buy in bulk when possible. Others are getting more serious about meal planning, focusing on lower-cost proteins like beans and lentils, or exploring ways to extend the shelf life of fresh produce by learning how to can or pickle. And hey, you might even see some creative experimentation with at-home bread baking or almond milk production in an effort to bypass the markups. Though the numbers on the price tags might be daunting, remember that knowledge is power. By staying informed about these market shifts, you can better strategize your grocery trips, take advantage of sales, and maybe get a little more adventurous in the kitchen by trying some substitutions. Experts remind us that these price hikes may not be permanent, and costs could stabilize later in the year if weather conditions, labor availability, and global supply chains improve. But for now, April is shaping up to be a month when some of our favorite staples become a bit more of a budgetary challenge. Should you rush out and panic buy every last carton of eggs or block of cheese? Probably not. That never helps. But it might be wise to keep an eye on your usual groceries and see if you can snag any deals or promotions before prices climb too high. Some grocery stores offer loyalty programs that provide discounts on certain items, so using those programs effectively might help you save. Also, watch for local farmers markets in your area. Sometimes direct-to-consumer sales can bypass a few layers of cost, although this can vary widely depending on where you live. In the grand scheme of things, the grocery system is always in flux, responding to a tangle of local and global factors. It's easy to feel frustrated when you realize that eggs are $1 more per dozen or that your favorite coffee blend has jumped in price yet again. If anything, this entire situation highlights just how vital farmers, ranchers, distributors, and retailers are to keeping our fridges and pantries well stocked. And for the rest of us, well, we might just need to get a bit more creative in the kitchen and more vigilant with our shopping strategies. Times like these can be a chance to explore new recipes and ingredients you wouldn't normally use, or maybe even give home gardening a try. After all, fresh homegrown tomatoes are hard to beat.